That pre-approval letter you're excited about, it might be the document that quietly destroys your financial future. And the craziest part, the bank hands it to you like it's good news, like they did a great job. Because the number on that paper, it's not what you should spend. It's the maximum amount of debt that they think you can survive. Not thrive on, survive on. The bank is not approving you based on what feels comfortable. They're approving you based on the maximum amount of debt that they can legally give you. That's it. End of story. Meanwhile, people are accidentally trapping themselves in payments that will keep them financially stuck for the next 25 to 30 years. Let's go. First bracket, the 75K a year. That's a solid income in Vancouver. You maybe work in tech, healthcare, trades, education. It doesn't matter. You're technically doing okay. But you're also tired of watching rent prices go insane, while home prices, they feel completely out of reach. After you pay your federal tax, your BC tax, your CPP, and your EI, you're probably taking home roughly $4,500 a month. And that's the real number that matters, not gross income. I want to talk about your take-home pay. Now, maybe you've been casually looking at condos online, running your mortgage calculators online, talking to friends at a brewery, trying to figure out if ownership is even realistic anymore. Then the pre-approval comes in and the bank tells you, hey, Mr. and Mrs. Client, $285,000 maximum approval in Vancouver. Yeah. So let's break down how they even got to that number, because once you understand the math behind it, you start to realize how dangerous these approval numbers actually turn out to be. In Canada, if you're putting less than 20% down, you need mortgage insurance through one of the providers, so CMHC, Sagen, Canada Guarantee, which means the government is backing the mortgage, not the bank. So the government created something called the stress test as part of the B20 rules, and your actual mortgage rate might be, let's say 4.4%, but they don't qualify you based at 4.4%. They're going to qualify you at the higher of either your contract rate plus 2% or 5.25%. So in this case, you're getting stress tested and qualifying at roughly 6.4%. Then they use something called GDS, gross debt servicing, which basically means how much of your gross income can go towards your housing costs, mortgage, taxes, and heat, and then strata fees if it's a condo. All of it combined. That's how they landed on roughly $285,000. Now here's where things get a little spicy and interesting. At your actual rate, that payment works out to around $2,100 a month all in. Out of your $4,550 take home, that's almost half of your income gone immediately before you go out and buy groceries, your gas, your cell phone, a car payment if you have it, insurance, before savings, before life. And depending on the lender, some banks will actually push you even higher, closer to $350,000, maybe even $375,000. And this is where I see people getting themselves into trouble relatively quickly, because suddenly your housing payment jumps closer to $2,700 a month. Now you've got roughly $1,800 left over to cover literally everything else. And that's the part that no one ever talks about. The bank approves you, but your life now feels financially suffocating or like you're drowning in debt. So what should you actually spend? And here's the rule I personally think makes the most sense for my clients, for normal people trying to build some wealth here in Canada, specifically Vancouver. Your total housing cost should stay around 1/3 of your take-home pay. Not gross, your take-home. Real tangible money. For this income level, that's around $1,500 a month max, which backs you roughly into a $200K purchase price. And I already know what I'm going to see in the comments and what you're thinking. You can't buy fuck all in Vancouver for $200K. You're right. Not in Vancouver, not in the outskirts of Vancouver. But here's what people misunderstand about first time buying specifically. Your first property, it's not your forever home. It's your entry point. It's your way to get the foot in the door and get onto the ladder. A place for you to build equity. A place for you to start your real estate journey. Maybe that means Chilliwack, Hope, Peachland, I don't know, somewhere further away from the city. Maybe it's a small one bedroom, not a glamorous, but it's financially survivable. And survivable matters more than impressive at this stage of the game, because the people who win financially usually aren't the people who bought the biggest house possible first. They're the people who gave themselves enough breathing room and they planned for worst case scenario and they kept investing and they kept moving forward. The next income bracket, 125K household income. Maybe it's a teacher or maybe it's a healthcare and a tech worker. Probably two solid incomes. After taxes, you're taking home around $7,800 a month. Now, you might need more space. Maybe there's kids involved. Maybe schools matter more now. Maybe you've managed to save your 10% down payment. The bank runs the numbers and they come back to you and your pre-approval comes back around $510,000. Sounds exciting until you see the actual monthly cost. At current rates, you're around $3,200 to $3,300 a month all in for housing out of a $7,800 take home. Again, over 40% of your real income disappearing into housing. Now, you might be shocked that me as a mortgage broker is saying this, but we gotta remember, we got daycare, we got sports, we got RSPs, RESPs, vacations, before life. And again, some lenders will even push that number higher, closer to 580, 600,000, which sounds great until you realize you just accidentally turned yourself into a high income family living paycheck to paycheck. And this is so common in today's marketplace. I see it all the time. This is the trap. People buy based on their approval amount instead of buying based on what their lifestyle actually wanted, and at 1/3 of the take home pay. Your target housing budget would be closer to $2,500 a month if you applied that 1/3 rule, which backs you down into about a roughly $350 to $375K purchase price. That's over $100,000 less than what the bank approved you for. But let's look at what happens now. So suddenly, you can invest monthly. You can build an emergency savings. You can max out your child's RESPs, probably travel, maybe breathe lighter. That's the difference. Now, our last income bracket, the 225K household income, this is where people assume, okay, we got a good income, we can live comfortable. Not necessarily, and I see this all the time. At that income level, you're taking home roughly 13 grand a month. And because you likely have a 20% down now, you're out of the insured space, you're into the uninsured mortgage territory. The bank comes back with something around 1.05 to 1.1 for pre-approval. And this is where the real trouble happens, because higher income, it usually means lifestyle creep too. I've lived it myself firsthand. You get the bigger house, the higher maintenance, the higher property taxes, newer vehicles, more expensive everything. Instead of going to like McDonald's, you're going to Brown's or whatever it is. That $1.1 million home, you're around $5,600 to $5,700 a month all in. Again, over 40% of your take home pay immediately disappearing. And yeah, sure, you can technically afford it, but there's a huge difference between affording something and building wealth while owning it. At 1/3 of take home pay, your housing target, it should be closer to around $4,300 monthly, which brings you back into the $650K purchase price, almost $400,000 less than the bank approved you for. And that difference potentially could change your life, because now you've got room to invest into the markets, room to save, room to build actual wealth, room to handle emergencies, and room to live. And this is the part that when I chat with clients, I see it daily, that they're missing. Wealthy people, they don't ask, what's the maximum payment I can survive on? They ask, what gives me the best long-term financial position? It's a completely different conversation and question altogether. So here's the very simple formula. Take your monthly take-home pay, divide it by 3. That's your maximum total housing budget. That's got to cover mortgage, taxes, insurance, heat, and strata if there is anything. Not because the bank says so, but because your future depends on it. Because financial freedom, it matters more than just impressing someone or impressing strangers with a big granite kitchen countertop. The bank's job is to tell you the maximum debt that they're going to approve you for. Your job is to decide what actually makes sense for your life, and that's where I come in. Those are two completely different numbers, and the gap between them, that gap is where financial stress either begins or gets avoided completely. If you want help running these numbers for you and your family's own situation, reach out to me directly. And when you're done with this one, check out last week's video where I break down paying off your mortgage early or investing.